Let's get right into it. An exchange of fire took place overnight between Hezbollah and the Israeli army along the Lebanon-Israeli border. According to the Israeli army, infrastructure belonging to the Iran-backed group was hit after two anti-tank launchers were detected coming from Lebanon. An Israeli truck driver was also killed in the attack. The man was carrying out infrastructure work for the military close to Israel's northern border when the area was hit. The two sides have been exchanging attacks since the start of the war in Gaza. While these have largely remained confined to border areas, there's been increase in intensity and scope. Meanwhile, Israel is keen on moving ahead with its planned offensive in Rafah, a place where more than 1.3 million civilians are sheltering. Israeli government spokesperson David Mencer said at a press briefing on Wednesday that the IDF is moving ahead to target Hamas militants operating in Rafah. He also said Israel remains committed to bringing home the remaining hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Mr. Mencer touched down on reports of mass graves around the Nasser hospital, calling them baseless and false.
I can confirm Israel is moving ahead with our operation to target Hamas in Rafah. We will, as usual, be making every effort to move civilians out of harm's way as we have done in the past. We believe that we've destroyed at least 18 or 19 of Hamas's 24 battalions, but the 4 battalions which remain in Rafah cannot be shielded from Israel. This war, which started, of course, on October 7th, when Hamas plowed through Israel's borders and massacred Israelis, Jews and Muslims in an unparalleled inhumane attack. Indeed, the worst attack against Jews since the Holocaust, taking more than 250 people hostage. Let no one be in any doubt whatsoever. Our war aims remain precisely the same: to bring home all 133 hostages, still brutally imprisoned by Hamas in their terror dungeons, more than 200 days. Women, men, children, a baby, and the elderly. We will bring them all home, both the living and the dead. We are destroying Hamas, and we will ensure that Gaza never becomes a threat to us ever again. Now to the claim of the supposed discovery of mass graves put out by Hamas over the Passover holiday here in Israel and parroted by others the world over. Needless to say, the claims are baseless and false. During the IDF's operation in the area of Nasser hospital, now this is unpleasant, unfortunately, we tried to locate hostages and missing persons, corpses, buried by Palestinians in the area of the Nasser hospital. The examination was conducted in a careful manner, only in places where our intelligence pointed to the presence of hostages. The examination was carried out respectfully, while maintaining the dignity of the deceased. Bodies were examined which did not belong to Israeli hostages, and they were returned to their place.
And on the other side, the Palestinian group Hamas says it remains committed to achieving an agreement with Israel to end the war in Gaza, but only if its conditions, including a lasting ceasefire, are met. Khalil Al-Haya, a member of the group's political bureau, said that Hamas is serious about releasing Israeli captives within the framework of an agreement that also ensures the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. He noted that Hamas will not accept a truce without a permanent ceasefire and a complete halt of Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip, which has killed more than 34,000 people. Ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas have been in limbo, with the two sides showing few signs that they are ready to compromise on their demands. But international mediators, Qatar, the United States and Egypt, have been engaged in intense behind-the-scenes talks to secure a deal. Well, the consequences are getting clearer for students staging Gaza ceasefire protests across U.S. universities. While hundreds of arrests have been made, some universities are beginning to take drastic action. The University of Southern California in Los Angeles, for instance, has cancelled its main graduation ceremony on the 10th of May, citing safety measures. In a statement, the university said it will not be able to host the main stage ceremony that traditionally brings 65,000 students, families and friends to its campus. It also noted that a Muslim student who was supposed to deliver a valedictory speech will no longer be able to do so due to unspecified security threats. Well, despite Ireland police crackdown, suspensions and admonitions from right-wing politicians, student protesters at dozens of U.S. colleges are continuing their campus demonstrations over the Gaza war into a second week. You must be wondering, how did we get here? Well, the protests all started in New York's Columbia University, where major protests over the war in Gaza broke out last week. Students are calling on universities to cut financial ties to Israel and divert from companies that say they are enabling its brutal war in Gaza. Students at Harvard, Georgetown, MIT and George Washington University also demanded ceasefire at their universities. The protests have since spread to dozens of colleges or college campuses throughout the U.S., with police marking upwards of 550 arrests to break up the peaceful rallies and try to clear encampments. Here's a breakdown of the arrests so far. In Columbia University, police arrested more than 100 protesters when they tried to clear a Gaza Solidarity encampment last week. In the University of Southern California, more than 90 people were arrested on Wednesday night for alleged trespassing. At the University of Texas, Austin, the campus was calm on Thursday, a day after police arrested dozens of students. At Emerson College, Boston police said on Thursday that 108 people were arrested at an encampment there. In New York University, police said 133 protesters had been taken into custody as at Wednesday. In Emory University, police dismantled a camp on Thursday morning. At least 17 people were detained. At Yale University, protests continued on Thursday after Monday's arrest of 48 people. In the meantime, hundreds of students are gathering, this time in Australia, to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. They set up tents at the University of Sydney, chanting slogans similar to those voiced in the US, such as calls for divesting from Israeli-linked universities. The students have also been chanting slogans against Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for his policy towards Israel and Gaza, calling on the government to strongly condemn the violence there. Meanwhile, tensions flared in Rome as thousands of pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli supporters demonstrated in the city on Thursday, marking Italy's Liberation Day. Protesters from both sides chanted slogans and held flags of Israel and Palestine. April 25th is a national holiday in Italy, marking the victory of the Italian resistance over Nazi Germany and Benito Mussolini's Italian Social Republic. The French institution also joined a surge of U.S. universities in setting up Gaza solidarity encampments on campus. Students occupied the Paris Institute of Political Studies building to call on the university to cut ties with Israeli-affiliated businesses and voice their support for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Elsewhere now, 2 British men have been charged with helping Russian intelligence services after a suspected arson attack on a Ukraine-linked business in London. The men have been identified as 20-year-old Dylan Earle and 22-year-old Jake Reeves. They were investigated following a fire in March at a warehouse in East London. 3 other suspects have been held on the charges. The investigation is being led by Metropolitan Police counter-terror officers. Mr. Earl is accused of overseeing the plan to target the business, as well as attempting to recruit individuals to materially assist a foreign intelligence service undertaking fraudulent activity and arson. Mr. Reeves is also accused of links to Russia, specifically that he took cash knowing it was from a foreign intelligence service. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says allies have not provided the support that was promised to Ukraine, noting that Germany is the only ally that provided the most assistance for Kyiv. Speaking at the SN Awards ceremony in Berlin, the NATO chief says every ally must do what they can to support Ukraine.
Germany is the European ally that provides the most support for Ukraine, not least because of your personal commitment, Boris. So one thing is certain, NATO can rely on Germany. So today, our world is more dangerous. So more than ever, we need Europe and North America to stand together. Every ally must do what is necessary to fully deliver on our defense plans. This means attaining and sustaining a minimum of 2% to ensure we have the capabilities we need and to share the burden of deterrence and defense. The second thing we must do is more support for Ukraine, because that is where we are being tested. Every day we see another attack, another atrocity. Russia is destroying Ukraine's infrastructure, including major power plants. And then we have to be honest. The reality is that in the recent months, NATO allies have not provided the support we have promised. For months, the US was not able to agree a new package for Ukraine. And in Europe, the delivery of ammunition is far below the levels we said we would provide.
Well, a journalist's son has ditched the playground by following his dad to a press briefing in Washington, D.C. He seized the opportunity to ask the spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State, Vedant Patel, a question regarding Ukraine's weaponry. Now let's hear from the young, aspiring journalist himself.
I know we're talking about Gaza right now, but what kind of weapons do they have? Does Ukraine have enough weapons to defend themselves or
That's such a great question. That's such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that, Calvin. I think your dad missed the daily press briefing yesterday, but that's all right, where we announced this. But we were really happy on the heels.
I was watching online.
I think we were really happy that on the heels of the National Security Supplemental that President Biden signed, that we were the same day able to announce $1 billion for Ukraine, additional security assistance that included arms, training, and other kinds of military assistance around related to these drawdowns. Some examples of what were part of that package included Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, small arms and additional rounds, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, 105 millimeter artillery rounds, and 60 millimeter mortar rounds. All of these things, Calvin, are part of our longstanding effort that has been in place since February of 2022 to continue supporting our Ukrainian partners as they defend themselves against Russia's incursion on their territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Away from that conflict, China has warned the United States not to step on its red lines. This caution was relayed directly by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to his U.S. counterpart, Antony Blinken. Both diplomats met in Beijing, making it Mr. Blinken's second visit to the country in less than a year. Speaking at a news conference, Mr. Wang says the China-U.S. relationship is beginning to be stable, but is still being tested by negative factors, adding that both countries could either engage in cooperation or confrontation and even slide into conflict. He set out what he called China's red lines on its sovereignty, security and development and warned the U.S. not to step on them. Chinese President Xi Jinping said the U.S. should seek common ground while reserving differences and not engage in vicious competition. He also said the U.S. should be partners and not rivals. Mr. Blinken, on the other hand, described the U.S.-China relationship as the most consequential relationship in the world, calling for active diplomacy between the two countries. He also warned Washington will act if China does not stop supplying Russia with items used in its assault on Ukraine. The United States and Philippines have kicked off their annual joint military drills. The drills, dubbed Balikatan 2024, hosts exercises dealing with maritime security, sensing and targeting, air and missile defense, dynamic missile strikes, cyber defense and information operations, alongside retaking an occupied island from a mock enemy. Officials say over 16,000 members of the armed forces of the Philippines and the U.S. Army are taking part in the exercises, which will last until the 10th of May. Australian and French militaries are also expected to take part in the joint exercise.
Participation of the French Navy was approved by our Defense Department, and also approved by our counterpart from the U.S. side. And they will be sailing, but not going into the 24 nautical mile areas, territory of the Philippines. They will have the multilateral maritime exercise that will be beyond the 24 nautical miles of our area already, which is international waters still. So with that, we see the participation of the French Navy as a good development for Balikatan, as we see like-minded countries wanting to achieve similar shared peace and prosperity in the region. We have highly considered the presence of the Chinese maritime militia in these areas, particularly in the EEZ part of our waters. And I believe at the operational level and tactical level, the commanders have already taken into consideration within their planning how to address the problems of the militia. But then again, we would like to emphasize that we adhere to international law, and these seas beyond our EEZ is international waters, and we adhere to the freedom of navigation of all ships going and passing through these areas. And that is what we are trying to preserve for the benefit of the whole region and to attain a stable regional situation, so that we can have both of the countries in the ASEAN will have prosperity and stability. There's no connected exercise relating to the resupply mission with the second Thomas show. So the exercise is highly separate between the Philippines and the U.S. forces, while the resupply mission for second Thomas show is a separate mission for the Philippine side. What is Balikatan really is? So Balikatan is a shoulder to shoulder and sharing the load together.
We are bringing in a defensive capability that's fairly new, and we are figuring out how to have it interoperate in our C2 structures. We're figuring out how we can move it around the various spots that we are going to employ it. And so I think that it's just a good opportunity for us to continue to exercise, increase our readiness. I think it's a natural marrying, natural wedding of capabilities, of modernization, and this is the perfect training ground for us to do that. Understand how to see to it, understand how to move it, understand their capabilities, understand interoperability, understand how to generate readiness, how to understand to generate deterrence, all under the banner of defensive concepts.
Well, climate change adversely impacts low-income communities on a much greater scale. To address this inequity, U.S. President Joe Biden announced a historic climate-focused initiative, along with $7 billion in grants through the Environmental Protection Agency's Solar for All grant competition. A key component of the Inflation Reduction Act's $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, spoke with Brenda Mallory, the 12th chair of the Council on Environmental Quality.
Good afternoon, Chair Mallory. We thank you so much for joining us. As we know, it's a very important time for the Biden administration, especially as we're in a time where climate change is at the utmost top of the conversation. And we know there's a real need to address climate change. We know there was recently a bill put forth kind of out of the Biden administration that is providing resources to low and income communities, really around Solar for All. Tell us what Solar for All really means.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for being interested in this. Is actually a very important part of the president and vice president's kind of commitment to making sure that we're tackling climate, but also doing it in ways that actually invest in our low-income communities who are often left out when it comes to federal resources. So yesterday, as part of the Earth Day announcement, the president announced that $7 billion in grant funding was going to be allocated out of a program that the Environmental Protection Agency is running called Solar for All. And this is a program that was specifically created and structured to focus on low-income and disadvantaged communities, because we know that they often have barriers that make it hard for those communities to actually take advantage of solar, and yet they are the communities that can need that support more, because they have higher energy burdens, often taking up larger percentages of their income. And so this is a way to bring cheaper electricity to people and have the program designed in a way that it's all about reaching out into those communities and making sure that they are aware of the opportunities and are supported in getting the resources on their properties.
Chair Mallory, we also know that many of those in the low to moderate income communities are not homeowners. And we think solar, unfortunately, we often think about the solar panels on someone's roof, right? So tell us how the energy costs are going to be reduced for those who are renters. What kind of options will they have?
Yeah, I think on that front, it really is. It's probably more organized towards other facilities within a community. So, for example, making sure that churches are able to take advantage of this kind of resource that allows the church itself to actually take advantage of it, and that usually has beneficial effects. Schools within communities are taking advantage of this kind of a resource, and we've seen how the funding from having solar on school properties enables the school to reduce the amount of their cost, and then that goes back into the supporting the educational programs for students. So there are sort of different ways in which that can help actually the community as a whole benefit from the availability of solar. And I think that because it is, as you said, so focused on ownership in general, there's more work in kind of getting the other owners within the community to take advantage of it so that their renters can benefit.
Now, we also know that climate change, unfortunately, adversely impacts low to moderate income communities. What are some of the areas that will be addressed? I know everyone knows about, water issues, clean water issues. But what are some other areas that will be addressed or with this money and this funding that the Biden administration is putting forth to ensure that climate change does not have as much of an impact as it has in the past on those communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, just a reminder that the Solar for All program is just like one program within a much larger agenda. And so, throughout the last 3 years, and in particular because of the resources that the president was able to obtain from the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, those are two things where his leadership resulted in us getting historic investments that are being used really across the board to help low-income communities. So things like when you talk about climate change, we are deploying more electric school buses in communities, right? So that's both helping the community on the reducing pollution, but it's also helping our climate goals. We've actually done a lot and deploying a significant amount of funding that is going towards helping people who are experiencing flooding. And we know, again, low-income communities are often hit hardest with this, and there is significant funding available through the Inflation Reduction Act, which enables kind of building resilience in communities. Heat, another big area where climate change is causing like what we call heat island effects, where communities that have fewer trees have higher temperatures. So for example, last year, we deployed $1 billion for an urban forestry program that the Department of Agriculture runs, which is enabling communities all across the country, all 50 states, to plant more trees, to maintain those trees, to train people to kind of work in the area of learning how to do that work, so that it's also an employment opportunity and a training opportunity for people who might be looking for jobs in the future.
Well, Chair Miller, thank you so much for sharing with us, as it's a very historic and important time for the administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Away from the United States, over in Germany, where hundreds of health workers are staging protests in front of Berlin's Charité Hospital. The protesters, at least 750 of them, are demanding better working conditions, as well as 12.5% increase in their wages.
We're here to demonstrate and stand up for better working conditions. That includes obviously also pay, but mostly it's about patient safety and about having enough personnel and enough doctors in the hospital to treat the patients to the best of our abilities. Right now, there are some situations where you have to treat 40 patients, 45 patients on your own if someone else is sick for 24 hours sometimes. So we're here basically to raise awareness and to just stand up for better working conditions.
I think they're not aware how much we do, especially I'm coming here right now after the night shift, just to show that we have all these questions that we have here. It's like about inflation, why we don't get the same amount in our salaries, and but mainly, why do we work so much at night? Why we don't have enough, obviously we don't have enough resources in terms of taking the best way for our patients. Yeah.
They try to save money by increasing our workload and reducing the quantity of physicians and quality of physicians. And we want better work conditions so that we can take better care of our patients.
We will come to a point where the next generation won't want to work in Germany. So they will go to Switzerland, to Sweden. They're now studying the languages to be able to work there. And in the end, the system may be good, or better yet, no, the treatment will be good here. But if you don't have the personnel to treat people, that won't do anything.
Treating hospitals like companies who have to produce profit. We don't expect that from fire workers. We don't expect that from police. Why do we have to do profit and increase profit if we're a hospital and we work in healthcare? You cannot make profit out of a sick system.
Well, it's the final day of one of the world's leading industrial trade fair. The Hanover Trade Fair happens every spring, but this year the industry leaders are grumbling. They're calling for significant reforms to strengthen Europe's largest economy and make it a more appealing place to do business. For more, We turn to DW's Cassandra Sundit in Berlin. Cassandra, what are the concerns at this industrial fair?
Well, the end of April is often cloudy, cold, and rainy in northern Germany, and it seems those dark clouds are hanging over the Hanover Trade Fair as well. The big concern is that recent figures predict that German industrial production will decline this year once again. It's expected to be down 1.5% compared to 2023. Now, industry is a critical part of the economy here. Recent figures put manufacturing at just over 20% of the total economy. That's nearly double the size of the industrial manufacturing sector in France, for example, which is the next largest economy in the EU. So at the trade fair, there are two big innovations that are being pushed. The first is hydrogen energy power, and the second is artificial intelligence. The Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, was at the opening of the trade fair, and he tried to emphasize the importance of innovation as a way to deal with the challenges posed by digitalization. He says now is a moment to take advantage of opportunities.
And the Hanover Fair comes as Germany's GDP forecast for this year has ticked up. What does that mean for the leading European economy?
That's right. New figures from the German government say the economic growth forecast for this year is now marginally better, but if you blink, you might miss it, because it's expected that instead of 0.2%, that the economy will grow by 0.3%. Now, why would anyone look twice at 0.1% better forecast? Well, some are hoping that it's a glimmer of hope, a ray of sunshine breaking through those clouds after a massive downgrade to the forecast, the economic forecast earlier this year. Now, the economy minister, Robert Habeck, while making this announcement, said that the economy here is still on rough waters, but the minister said that energy prices are down and that production is on the rise, and that it's all having an impact on inflation here. Habeck said the government is expecting an inflation rate just above its target this year at 2.4%, with it falling next year to under the target at 1.8%.
Okay, so it does sound like there's a lot of room for improvement, Cassandra. So what's being suggested?
So even as Chancellor Scholz was getting kudos from some industry leaders at the Hanover Trade Fair, there was a call to do more. The head of the big lobbying group, the Federation of German Industries, is making a lot of demands this week. They want more competitive energy prices and a lower corporate tax burden. And that sentiment was echoed by Economy Minister Habeck. He said this week that despite changes, that he remains concerned about the structural problems of Germany as a business location. Habeck has called for the strengthening of innovation and the reduction of unnecessary bureaucracy, as well as greater incentives to work, so that, quote, more people are willing to work harder and longer.
Cassandra, thank you for your time. Let's move ahead. Indians are voting in the second phase of the election as Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeks a third term. The first phase of the vote was held on April the 19th in 102 constituencies across 21 states and union territories. Mr. Modi urged people to vote in record numbers to strengthen democracy, but opponents say repression and sectarianism have increased under his leadership. Voters will elect representatives to fill 543 seats of the Lok Sabha. The party or coalition that secures a majority will form the next government. About 969 million registered voters are eligible to participate in the world's largest democratic exercise over 6 weeks. The results of the polls will be announced on June the 4th. Here in Africa, Togo will be heading to the polls also on Monday, the 29th of April, in legislative elections that follow a series of government crackdowns on opposition protests and the passing of a controversial new constitution that could allow the president to stay in power indefinitely. The party of President Faure Gnassingbé has passed a constitution which would see Parliament elect the president instead of a direct vote by people, although the president is yet to sign off on it. Civil society organizations and opposition supporters have condemned the move, calling it anti-democratic, as it would allow Mr. Gnassingbé to eventually stay in power indefinitely. Opposition protests have been banned ahead of the election and foreign reporters forbidden from covering the vote. The Catholic Church has also been barred from acting as observers. Monday's vote is expected to give the opposition a chance to gain more seats in Parliament, which could give them more say on major policy changes like the passing of a new constitution. Away from elections, South African Reserve Bank has established its first deposit insurance body called the Corporation for Deposits Insurance. The SARB said the body is aimed at protecting people's bank deposits if the bank cannot honor its commitments to its clients. The bank added that it will protect qualifying depositors, including individuals and non-financial business, in case of a possible bank failure by covering up to 100,000 rand per bank. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more.
Since 1990, South Africa has witnessed the collapse of more than 10 banks, consistently attributed to liquidity challenges and poor management. Now, such failures frequently result in financial losses for individuals should a bank falter. The South African Reserve Bank's Corporation and Deposit Insurance aims to address these challenges.
For central banks, it makes sense to protect depositors, to remove the incentives to run. This is because bank runs offer what economists call a dual equilibrium problem.
Deputy Governor Dr. Mampo Modise outlines key priorities and initiatives that CODI will focus on to further strengthen its effectiveness.
So as part of CODI and in the Act, public awareness is key. So what we're going to do from now on, after the launch, is to go on public awareness campaigns everywhere, different languages, so that our people can access the information and understand the information. There's no point in having an entity that has a mandate that is not understood. So as part of CODI and in the legislation, it is mandated that we do public awareness so that the depositors can understand what the product is.
Yes, so for the past few years, CODI has been working on the legislative framework for its operationalization. For us to be able to implement the deposit insurance fund, for example, that we can use to protect the depositors in the unlikely event that their bank would fail. We're also busy with the systems implementation for banks to submit information to CODI. We need this information to be able to make the calculations for financial contributions from the banks, which we then use to build the deposit insurance fund to the benefit of the depositors. So at this point, that's the main focus.
But why did it take so long for the legislature to be passed in Parliament? Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana explains.
No, I mean the regulatory thing. The constitution in South Africa demands a lot for making a legislation. You've got to have public hearings, you've got all of those things, you've got two houses, they've got to do public hearings. It's not deliberate or some sinister motive. It's just how the constitution is structured.
The South African Reserve Bank says CODI is a strategic initiative to fortify South Africa's financial infrastructure. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
At least 155 people have died after heavy rainfall caused widespread flooding and landslides in Tanzania. The disaster also left about 236 people injured. About 200,000 people and more than 51,000 households were affected by the disaster. Infrastructure such as roads, bridges and railways have also been damaged by the floods. Authorities are warning the rainfall might continue into May and urged families to evacuate flood-prone areas immediately. The 10th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development has closed in Addis Ababa, with member states of the Economic Commission for Africa agreeing to 11 key messages for the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient and innovative solutions to reinforce the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 and to eradicate poverty in times of multiple crises. Our correspondent Ayala Kasim reports.
In many United Nations resolutions, agreement on language is almost always a major issue.
So we like actually to address that
And at the closing session of the 10th African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, the scenario is not different, going through each line of the draft. With bureaucratic thoroughness, member states question, suggest, and even change text to address their concerns.
On the third line, to enhance human rights approaches, I would suggest to enhance dignity and human rights approaches.
And at the end of the day, the Addis Ababa Declaration calls on participants that will be at the Summit of the Future in September to consider and adopt commitments. We align with Africa's priorities and we focus on sustainable development and financing for development that will cater for peace and security, scientific innovation and digital cooperation, young people and future generations, and transformation of global governance. It also urges member states of the Economic Commission for Africa and their partners to redouble efforts to revitalize institutions, policies, plans and programs, and channel finance to rescue the sustainable development goals, and then ask the United Nations resident coordinators and the United Nations country teams to develop and deliver strong, coordinated and targeted support to members of the Economic Commission for Africa with a view to achieving a meaningful and tangible transformation in food systems, education systems, climate change, and many other areas.
Africa needs investment of about 1.3 trillion US dollars a year to achieve the SDGs by 2030, and investments of over 2.8 trillion US dollars in mitigation and adaptation alone in order to implement the nationally determined contributions.
Africa races against time to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and the Malabo commitment to end hunger by 2025 while battling with the current challenge of maintaining peace and development.
The world has found this year more than $260 billion, $2.6 trillion for war. Surely, if we can find that resources for war, we can find those resources for peace and development. Because it is that peace and is that development which we need to offer today to our children. And that peace and development cannot be brought with the knowledge and technology of the past.
Mauritania has been charged with presenting the key messages to all high-level meetings coming up later this year. But the delegates living here know that the real work of turning words into action has just begun. From UNECA headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Well, in the last 6 months, the Lagos state government has sealed about 400 event centers across the state as a result of noise pollution. This is according to the general manager of the State Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Babatunde Ajayi, who spoke at the awareness walk on noise pollution recently.
Blaring of car horns, playing music to the highest volume level are some of the causes of noise pollution which affects the eardrum. And curbing noise pollution is the reason for this awareness walk in Lagos State, an initiative organized by the State Environmental Protection Agency in commemoration of the 2024 International Noise Awareness Day to educate the people on the dangers of noise pollution.
Noise is harmful and noise is helpful. For example, incident of fire disaster, where we make a noise, is an awareness noise. But when we begin to loud our microphones every morning, we have so many senior citizens in our society, we have babies, we have so many people that noise can even aggravate their health.
LASEPA officials, students, all carrying placards with different inscriptions, moving along Ikeja Road, distributing flyers to motorists, passengers, passers-by, to enlighten them on the best ways of saving their ears.
Let's work together to ensure a sustainable environment, a noiseless Lagos for environment, and a better future for us as a whole.
The awareness walk extends to the State Secretariat, Alausa, Ikeja, to also keep the civil servants abreast of the effects of noise pollution. Moving into the premises of the State Environmental Protection Agency, LASEPA, the students are encouraged to remain focused in their studies and not to get distracted with happenings around them.
As a student, you know that noise pollution can disrupt your education. Can disrupt communication between the students and the learners. Yes or no? Yes. So we must always try to ensure that our classrooms or wherever we find ourselves, we're able to manage communication.
And for the general manager of LASEPA, residents must work towards reducing the noise level in Lagos for the well-being of everyone.
While we are doing advocacy, we're also balancing it with a lot of enforcement. So in the past 6 months, we have sealed almost 400 event centers, lounges, bars, noisy clubs, noisy places, even religious homes. And my message to Lagosians is to turn the noise down, reduce the volume. Let us keep it habitable. Let us be considerate of our neighbors. Let us know that the world is watching. LASEPA is always watching. If you are causing nuisance in your environment, we will come shut you down.
Noise can be harmful to human health, and the Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency appeals to motorists, event centers to carry out their businesses peacefully without creating high noise levels that could amount to pollution.
An innovative platform revolutionizing healthcare access is connecting patients with medical professionals through a user-friendly mobile application. By leveraging technology, the startup Clafia aims to bridge the gap between patients and healthcare providers.
In an effort to revolutionize healthcare accessibility, this health tech platform, Clafia, is connecting patients with vital healthcare services right at their fingertips.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead to our meeting now, but have a great day.
With a vision for community wellness, their goal is to make quality healthcare accessible to everyone, regardless of their location or status, by bridging the gap between patients and community health workers. The platform is particularly beneficial for those in rural or remote areas where access to medical facilities can be challenging.
Clafia, I like to describe as a digital primary health care center. We are connecting individuals and businesses to licensed healthcare practitioners to provide on-demand primary care services from their mobile phones.
From virtual consultations to in-person visits, the startup provides comprehensive healthcare services, ensuring that healthcare is just a click or a USSD code away.
We experienced firsthand the difficulties of accessing healthcare, and for us it wasn't a function of could we afford it, it was more so where can we find the best hospitals, the best doctors, the best nurses, where we can get that good healthcare experience for my siblings, for my family. But I have two siblings that have a chronic condition, and because of that, my parents essentially moved us back to the United States to ensure that they can get access to a better quality healthcare system.
Part of what sets it apart is its innovative use of technology, particularly its USSD feature, which enables users to access healthcare even without a smartphone.
What Clafia is today is not what I had in mind, but I got a lot of support from my professors. They encouraged me to actually start pitching the idea at pitch competitions. I didn't think of Clafia as a business. It was more so, how can I give back to my community and my family and my friends? And so when I started to pitch the idea around Georgetown, that's when I started to refine the idea.
This service ensures no one is left behind in receiving quality health care, especially in a country where smartphone penetration is still evolving.
Clafia's core model, which is to connect nurses or community health officers who are in your communities to your homes or your workplace, wherever you feel safe to provide that in in-person or virtual primary care services. And we were getting quite a bit of good traction there, but we realized that our customers wanted more. So they would ask questions like, could you also help us with drug delivery? Or why don't you finish what you started? Because yes, I'm going to need other things, or you're going to help us with that. So can you help us with our medicine delivery? Could you help us with diagnostics? Do you have access to other specialists? And so it wasn't until that moment that we realized we had to evolve into what I would describe as a digital primary healthcare center.
Despite its achievement, the startup faces its share of challenges, including funding and addressing the shortage of healthcare professionals.
And finally, on the program, a bulldog from Argentina has become a viral sensation for its skateboarding skills. The video shows bulldog Pomelo's incredible balance as he cruises around a square, flipping his board around and changing direction with ease. According to Pomelo's owner, the bulldog discovered his exceptional talents by chance and has been carving up the streets of the capital, Buenos Aires, ever since. The pet owner posted a video of Pomelo's skating antics on TikTok, where it received over 2.6 billion views and over 380,000 likes. He says he's grateful to his four-legged animal friend, who he says gave him life and took away the anguish of the past. Well, even I can't skate like that. But that's it on the program. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jackie Rogers.